There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have a review for you of a novel I finished a few days ago. Sunjeev Sahota's 2015 novel, The Year of the Runaways. It was shortlisted for the Booker Prize that year, and it should have won! I don't remember what won. Oh, the Jamaican novel. The name escapes me, but I haven't read that one. 32 Ways of Looking at the Assassination of... what's his name? Boy, did I ever love this novel. I loved it so much that this is my third try to make a cogent review. When I love a book this much, it's really hard to talk about. So, let's see if I can put a few interesting thoughts together about it, shall we? This is a novel about 3 Indian men who come to the UK as immigrants, undocumented immigrants, and end up in Sheffield, in Yorkshire. It's also the story of a British-born Indian Sikh young woman named Narinder, and how their lives intersect. Narinder ends up being the visa wife of one of the male characters, Randeep, and that's how they are connected. And the opening paragraph is when Randeep is waiting for Narinder to arrive in the flat in Sheffield that he has rented for her, where they will be pretending to live together as man and wife. They did get legally married in India a few months before. They don't know each other at all, and it's strictly for the purposes of him attaining a visa, and he in fact lives several blocks away with a bunch of Indian men that are all working on the same construction job, including the other 2 main characters, Avatar and Tochi. I love this opening paragraph. I think it showcases Sunjeev Sahota's writing and also sets the tone of the novel and the preoccupations of the novel just beautifully. So here it is. Randeep Sangera stood in front of the green and blue map tacked to the wall. The map had come with the flat, and though it was big and wrinkled, and cigarette butts had once stubbed black islands into the mid-Atlantic, he'd kept it, a reminder of the world outside. He was less sure about the flowers, guilty-looking things he'd spent too long choosing at the petrol station. Get rid of them, he decided, but then heard someone was parking up outside, and the thought flew out of his head. So Randeep has a bit of a fantasy that this sham of a marriage might turn into a proper marriage, so that's one of the themes. He and the guy from his hometown, Avatar, and a bunch of other guys, including another Indian man from Bihar province, which apparently is the poorest province in India, Tochi, are living together in a house, and they're doing construction work, and it doesn't pay well, and it's not going well, and they're all scraping by to make ends meet. And there's a competitive vibe and kind of an ominous vibe in the house, but they also, try to make friends, and can they really trust each other? Trust is a big issue in this novel. But let me take a step back and just say this is a very topical novel along the lines of a couple books about immigration that were on the Booker list this year that, in my humble opinion, were crap and nobody will remember or be talking about within 5 or 10 years. Whereas this novel, The Year of the Runaways, I think will stand the test of time, because this is a richly literary novel with characters so fully developed that I'm still carrying them around after putting the book down 5 days ago, and I can't stop thinking about them, and I expect that will be largely true a year from now. More than any novel I've read in a while, Sunjeev Sahota has demonstrated the power of the conventional novel by presenting these 4 complicated characters, setting them in motion, and we see each character through the other character's eyes and don't really get a sense of who anybody is until the end. And there's a tension. So, for example, Narinder, the woman, I really didn't like her because I was only seeing her through Randeep's eyes. And it's not that he didn't like her, But I was judging her by the way she was treating him, and only much later in the novel do we get inside Narinder, and I still had my opinions about how she had been treating Randeep, but once I got inside her, everything shifted and deepened. And Sunjeev Sahota does that kind of thing, which is what novels do, but he does it so well. I just fell into this novel. When I stumble upon a novel this good, I always slow right down, and boy did I slow right down. I read this, I did it on ebook. But I think the physical book is about 500 pages, and I read it over 2.5 months, and almost feel like that was too fast. But that's my own peccadillo. We see how hard the life is for these guys in the UK, and how hard they work, and how little they're able to scrimp and save, and what motivates them to come over here. But here's a passage that I was quite struck by. And this is about Avtar. He is from the same place as in India as Randeep. So this is him in Sheffield in his room one night. That night, sitting on his mattress in the room he shared with 2 others, Avtar studied the 4 small piles he'd made of his money. The first pile was for the monthly repayment on what he owed Bal. The second for the loan taken out against his father's shawl shop. The third pile was meant to help his parents with their rent and bills, and, lastly, a pile for his own expenses here in England. No savings pile. There'd never been a savings pile. No matter. Once the loans were paid off, then saving could begin. He started counting it all again when from across the room came a loud, grunting snore and a turning over. Instinctively, Avtar crushed the notes together and hid them under his arms. He waited until he was sure the other 2 weren't faking their sleep, and then he separated the money into piles again. It was no good. Bal was coming up in his BMW next week, and still there wasn't enough. He took some notes from his parents' pile and split it between the first 2. Still, he was short. He recounted how much he had set aside for himself, and took half of this and distributed it evenly among the rest. This worry about money, and especially about loan sharks that have connections back in India, takes an ominous tone. I don't want to say too much. You need to read the book, but it is a very serious affair if these characters are not able to pay back their loans, because the loan sharks' power extends back into India. And here's a quote that is from much earlier in the novel, and I believe it's between Avtar and Randeep, talking about their dreams and why they want to go to the UK. One of them says to the other, "And we will work when we are all in England, with well-paid jobs worthy of a family like ours. What hope for that in this snake basket of a land?" So there's the optimism, and the quote just before was the at least short-term reality of what it was like. The kind of work these guys do, and the way they're taken advantage of by their bosses, most of whom are from within their own cultures, but not exclusively. The kindness they stumble upon. Tochi is probably the one who captured my imagination the most. He's from a Chamar family, which is the untouchable caste in India, and his family suffers a horrific fate during a nationalist massacre in India, and he ends up coming to the UK as an illegal immigrant, and he is traumatized and sullen and secretive, and probably the one I fell in love with the most. Narinder is a do-gooder, deeply devout woman living with a very conservative father and especially brother, wants to help people, is easily taken advantage of because of that, and changes so much in the course of the story that she's just fascinating. Sunjeev Sahota is somebody I've fallen in love with. I've watched approximately 10 or 15 minutes of interviews with him on YouTube, which you can find, and there's an added benefit if you search for him on YouTube, because you also get search results for a pretty darn sexy Indian wrestler named Sunjeev Sahota, so yeah, check that out. Sunjeev Sahota is a tall, really tall, funny-looking guy, and you just have to listen to him talk for about 3 minutes, and you fall in love with him. I can't wait for his next novel. I'm so excited to follow his career from here on in. This novel ripped my heart out. And I also have this half-assed, inchoate theory that just occurred to me as I was filming the first or second of these videos, and I haven't had the time to do any more reading or any much more thinking about it. But this novel made me think a lot about a novel by a Indo-Canadian novelist, the wonderful Rohinton Mistry, and his novel A Fine Balance, which I read earlier this year and loved. And it too was similarly heartbreaking. It was even a bleaker ending. I wouldn't describe the ending of this book as bleak, but and that novel is about several characters in India. There's no emigration per se, with the exception of one character, but it's primarily located solely within India. I'm curious about to what degree I can generalize this about Indian fiction, modern Indian fiction as a whole. I haven't read enough. But it intrigues me deeply that in these two novels, and unlike modern Western fiction, really play with the conventional 19th century novelistic expectations around closure. Everybody, the boy gets the girl and everybody's lives happily ever after. Modern fiction doesn't do that anymore, and these two novels don't either, but in a way that sets them apart from any other novel I've read recently. They dangle that conventional happy ending at you, at the reader, in a way that totally tugged on my heartstrings, so that I was expecting that kind of a happy ending, which is not something I ever look for in modern Western fiction, but when it was dangled before me, and then both writers snatch it away, so that I was left feeling devastated in a way that, if I was reading a Western novel, I wouldn't have even had those expectations, and there would have been, when I say Western novel, of course I mean modern Western novel, but I would have never had such expectations, nor would the writer have dangled them before me. Is this an Indian literary thing? I don't know. The endings of these two novels fascinated me. This is very inchoate. It's something that I'm going to keep in my mind as I read more widely in Indian fiction. Another of my top reads this year was Arundhati Roy's second novel, The Ministry of Utmost Happiness, and I can't really fit that into this theory. But anyway, these two novels, it really is something that has seized my imagination. But be all that as it may, this is an incredible novel. I loved it. It's one of my top reads of the year. And to sum up, I would say, yes, it's a story of family, friendship, faith, and home. But more deeply than that, and the core of its emotional power is, who are we? Who are these characters? And by extension, who am I? Who would any of us be when those things are stripped away? Please check it out, and thank you for watching.